No time, what's up? It's the Culture Detective here, investigating your favorite albums. Right now, I'm running out of time. I'm supposed to be leaving right now, but I cannot because I have to do this stuff. So let's talk about the worst albums of 2019. Top 20, not top 15, because there are a lot of bad albums this year, so I have to expand the list right now. Anyways, we have some dishonorable mentions, starting off with Maggie Rogers with Heard It in a Past Life. Yeah, Pharrell Williams, Protege, Maggie Rogers, Heard It in a Past Life, and as far as pop music goes, this album's pretty boring. And then we have Avril Lavigne's Head Above Water, which is a comeback album. And this is supposed to be a comeback album, and it's kind of disappointing and underwhelming because this album turned out to be overblown, outdated, and kind of melodramatic. And then afterwards, we have the new Zayn album, Icarus Falls. Zayn Malik, a former member of One Direction. This album, I mean, it doesn't have to be this long, okay? This album doesn't have to be this long. And then at the end, we have Mac DeMarco, unfortunately, one of my favorite indie folk singer-songwriters, coming out with probably his weakest project to date. We have Here Comes the Cowboy. Again, I don't know if he's like taking the piss on this album or not, because this is his least amount of effort possible given into the album. There are a lot of songs here that literally sound like nothing's going on, and I just don't know what's going on with the album. Anyways, here are my top 20 worst albums of the year. At number 20, I'm giving it to Papa Roach with Who Do You Trust? If you like your pop punk, very sugary, very bloated, very mainstream and commercial, look no further than this. And at number 19, I am giving it to Lil Pump with Harvard Dropout. Yeah, this album sucks. We have the Lil Pump mixtape earlier on in the year 2017, and that even though that mixtape is pretty crappy, at least we get something exciting and fun and stupid out of it to laugh at, to gawk at. But for this album, it's just straight up boring. There literally is no personality on this album, and all we have left is a bunch of stupid, hedonistic, repetitive, tedious tracks that are not interesting at all. And at number 18, I'm giving it to DJ Khaled with Father of Asahd. Yeah, this album is garbage. It's a mess. This is one of the laziest album ever, and the reason behind this is that DJ Khaled doesn't even sing on the album. He doesn't even rap on the album. He doesn't even produce on the album. The only few appearances that DJ Khaled made on the album are the tags, I guess, where DJ Khaled goes, "We the best music," or another one, and another one. And that's all DJ Khaled did on this album. And his name is attached to the album. What the hell? But still, I mean, with all the cash grabbing features and all that, at least there are a few songs on this project that I like, especially for that Nipsey Hussle song, which I thought is absolutely fantastic, and that is the major reason why this album is not ranked super low. Anyways, afterwards, at number 17, I'm giving it to Jaden Smith with his latest album, ERYS. Not only does he rip off every single artist possible, all the way from Brockhampton to Kanye West, now Travis Scott, like very, very, very Travis Scott. This album literally sounds like a watered down, dumbed down Astroworld. It's pretty boring of an album, I have to admit. And at number 16, even more watered down, even more boring, it has to be Pierre Bourne's the Life of Pierre 4. I mean, look at the album cover. It's just purple. It's just plain purple. And you know, given the album cover and given the track list here, you can tell that minimal amounts of effort are put into this album, and it's just boring. It's just sleepy. This album just puts you to sleep. Just yeah. What can I say? I mean, again, there are a couple of tracks here with somewhat flavorful beats, but like other than that, pretty sleepy. Anyways, at number 15, I'm giving it to my boy Champagne Papi Drake with his latest mixtape compilation, something, a soundtrack, care package. First of all, the album cover is probably the worst of the year. It's not even properly cropped, and it's poorly made. It looks like it's made from MS Paint. Second of all, the album itself, or the compilation soundtrack thing itself, it's pretty bad. Not only are a lot of the tracks just straight up boring, with demo quality, but some tracks here are just repetitious and uninteresting. So yeah, there are a couple of good songs with good beats, but you know, overall pretty bloated. At number 14, I'm sorry, but I have to give it to Trippie Redd with exclamation mark. Because yeah, you know, after the few singles that Trippie Redd dropped before this album, I was actually pretty excited because Topanga is a legitimately catchy song, but with this album here, exclamation mark, it's just another one of those lackluster auto-tune crooning albums where almost every single track sounds the same. And yeah, kind of disappointed, unfortunately. And at number 13, I'm giving it to Highly Suspect's MCID. I've talked about this album thoroughly in my mini albums review. And yeah, again, with all the rip-offs, I mean, if they're not ripping off Red Hot Chili Peppers, then they're ripping off Weezer. If not, then they're ripping off Nirvana or Foo Fighters. They're always ripping someone off. And whenever they try to do this musical genre, they fail pretty miserably, and sometimes the beat is off, sometimes the instrumental is cheesy, and for most of the times the lyrics, they are just trash. And not only are they melodramatic, but they don't even make sense. That's how bad they are. Anyways, at number 12, of course, I have to give it to Iggy Azalea with In My Defense. If you remember, a few years ago, Iggy Azalea dropped the new classic because she wants to hop on the whole rap trend and be cool and all, and it failed because it was such a terrible album. Now she's back, except since trap rap is all the rage right now, this album, In My Defense, is literally like the new classic, but with trap beats slapped on top. And yeah, not only is this album very uninteresting and boring, but also sloppily produced, and Iggy Azalea delivers some of the most obnoxious performances ever. At number 11, I am giving it to Logic with Supermarket. Yeah, so apparently Logic came out with 2 records this year, and this is the first one. And it is said to be a soundtrack to a novel, which I thought was really weird. Like, why would you need music to back up a novel? But here we are, and this isn't a rap album at all. This is a straight up indie pop rock album with a little country, with a little folk sprinkled on top. And as expected, given Logic's talent in music, this album is a hot mess. It's either Logic is ripping someone off, again, ripping Radiohead off, maybe ripping Mac DeMarco off, maybe ripping Coldplay off, or he's just coming out with corny, cringy music. and it's a pretty miserable failure, I must say. And now we are in the top 10 worst albums of the year. At number 10, I'm giving it to my boy Ed Sheeran with number 6 Collaborations Project. I was really excited for this album to come out because I really wanted to talk shit about this album, and this album indeed is the worst Ed Sheeran album so far. It's even worse than Divide. And basically, on every single track, Ed Sheeran collaborates with one or two or three other artists, and it's just this huge cash grab. And all of the tracks here, they sound like gentrified, washed out, watered down music. Of course, Ed Sheeran tries a little bit of the Latin pop music on the second track, South of the Border, and given the lyrical themes of the track, this track is one of the grossest tracks on the album, and apparently Ed Sheeran has jungle fever. Like, I get it, accepting the people south of the border and anywhere in the world actually, but saying that you have jungle fever and the song featuring Cardi B and Camila Cabello, and then, of course, we have the Stormzy track, which is just stereotypical London. We have the I Don't Care track featuring Justin Bieber, which is obnoxious and tedious. And then we have the last song, Blow, horns out, rock and roll, and it's just one of the worst songs I've heard all year. It's bad. It's a really bad album. And then at number 9, an album that I can't stomach even more, and that is Madonna's Madam X. Yeah, not many people talk about this album because Madonna is pretty much out of the spotlight at this point. She's not that relevant of a singer anymore. But yeah, in order to be more relevant, Madonna decided to dabble into Latin pop music. So we have Madam X, and 90% of the album is Latin pop music, and it's terrible because it's basically gentrified, whitewashed Latin pop music with no personality or flavor whatsoever. It sounds like mainstream commercial garbage. And then we have the vocals on this thing, because for 90% of the time, Madonna slaps this thick autotune on top of her vocals, and it's not only is it monotone, it's incredibly annoying. And then we have the beats and the weird production choices, which didn't pan out as well, and it just ends off sounding incredibly cringy. And this album is one big cringe, I have to say. And then at number 8, Logic returns with Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. Yeah, while in concept it's not as terrible as Supermarket, but musically I find this album to be even more irritating than Supermarket, given how boring some of the beats are and how corny some of the performances and lyrics are. This is Logic at his worst, literally the worst project that Logic had ever come out with. And yeah, that Will Smith song, really, and that song Icy, really, with the vocal performances, I see that. Yeah, it's bad. And afterwards, at number 7, unfortunately, even though I have a respect towards this band, but this album is a really shite, and that is Blink 182 with the track with the album 9, because it's their 9th album. Get it? 9. Get it? Genius album title. Anyways, yeah, Blink 182 kinda already lost it, because no matter how hard they try to hit hard, the music that they're making is bloated, sugary, corny, watered down, but also at the same time just overblown pop punk that sounds very cheesy. Yeah. And then again, we have the lyrics. They're terrible as well. I mean, of course, MCID's lyrics are terrible. So is this one. Again, some of the lyrics here, they're so bad they don't even make sense. It's like as if an AI wrote these lyrics for them. None of the tracks actually stand out to me, and none of the tracks actually hit all that hard, and the entire album just sounds like a drab, sluggish, overblown, sugary pop punk album that is kinda cringy and hard to stomach through. Anyways, at my number 6 place, I am giving it to Nav with Bad Habits. Nav reappears on my list, yes, and Nav once again returns with one of the most boring albums of all times, period. This, I mean, yeah, of course, in recent years, given the trend that hip hop is going right now, of course, we're gonna have a lot of boring albums. The Drake album this year, the Lil Pump album this year, the Pierre Bourne album this year, the Trippie Redd album this year. But the most boring of the most boring has to be Nav, Bad Habit. Reckless is already bad enough, and then we have this album, which is even more boring. So boring that every single track sounds like nothing. Sounds like the void. This album is a void. It's an abyss. There's literally nothing on it. Every single track sounds the same, with the same tempo, same pace, same monotone, robotic vocals. Sometimes Nav even sounds like a text-to-speech software. And, yeah. After listening to this album, 2 seconds after listening to this album, you would immediately forget about everything that you've heard. So, yeah, number 6. I'm actually running out of time. Okay, at number 5, I am placing AJR's Neotheater. I've reviewed this album thoroughly as well, and, why? So AJR makes music for millennials. They make millennial pop music, and they gather all the dumb, stereotypical millennial cliches they could ever find and group them together and condense them into this album, and actually all their albums. And yeah, it's bad because I'm technically a millennial, and that's not. This album, it doesn't sound like being a millennial at all, because being a millennial in this album is like sunshine and rainbows, and if you're sad, it's rainy and cloudy and foggy. Everything's very cartoony, everything's very Disney World, and listening to albums like this, it legitimately irritates me. It pisses me off. And tracks here like the birthday party song, like "Thank you for coming to my birthday party," that's fucking stupid. Actually, most of the tracks here are that stupid. We have 100 Bad Days, which totally misunderstands the reason behind valuing bad experiences. And then we have songs here that aren't even songs. They don't have enough song ideas, so they literally made a song about making a song, about being sponsored. Yeah, it's garbage. And then we have Dear Winter, which is this really gross white girl ukulele track. What the heck? Yeah. Anyways, at number 4, I'm giving it to Gunna with Drip or Drown 2. I've talked about this album earlier on, and this is a very, very boring album. Yeah, probably just as boring as Nav's Bad Habits. Except the reason why I'm putting this album higher than Bad Habits is because some of the beats here, they don't even make sense. The last track of the album, Who You Foolin', Gunna basically tries to fuse classical Chinese music with a trap beat, and it doesn't make sense at all. It's incompatible, and it sounds friggin' ridiculous. And throughout the entire album, Gunna sounds like a bad Young Thug impersonation. And yeah, none of the tracks are good. All of the tracks are boring, and I had my fair share of migraines going through this album. Anyways, at number 3, Vic Mensa, or his punk rock edgy alter ego 93 Punks, with the self-titled album 93 Punks, I guess. This album is one big cringe fest because Vic Mensa and his punk rock alter ego decides to go punk rock on this album, and what came out of it is very cringy, very corny, and very cheesy. Some of the cheapest riffs and cheapest drum beats are on this album, and if you know punk rock music, guitars and drums are really, really important. And this album totally fails at both the drums and the guitars. And then for the vocals, come on, it's Vic Mensa. We have tracks like Fist Fight, which is one of the cringiest songs all year. And we also have other songs. I mean, sure, Vic Mensa, Vic Mensa is trying to address some of the political issues that the world is facing nowadays, and he's coming from a good place, except the music, the product of that is just ridiculously bad, and this album is really hard to stomach through. And then at number 2, this is going to be surprising. Nostalgia Critic, The Wall. So Nostalgia Critic, aka Doug Walker, is a YouTuber slash a movie critic on YouTube, and one day he decides to parody Pink Floyd The Wall and make an entire album out of it. And it is one of the most offensive, disrespectful, distasteful albums I've ever heard all my life. Because instead of coming up with good points against The Wall, all he comes up with is bullshit, destructive criticisms that aren't even funny to begin with, and it just sounds absolutely annoying and actually very irritating. Also, I don't know that many people who hate The Wall, because The Wall is legitimately one of the most culturally impactful and greatest albums of all times, and to make an entire parody album out of it and do it so sloppily and terribly, it's pretty offensive, pretty disrespectful. And the only reason why I'm not placing this at number 1 spot is because it is such a lazy album idea. It doesn't even deserve the number 1 spot. And also, the bass player on this album is Rob Scallion, which I think did a pretty faithful cover of the tracks off of The Wall, which isn't a bad thing at all. But still, Doug Walker just being super duper cringy and nonsensical all over this thing, making one of the worst abominations in music history. At my number 1 spot, you guessed it right, it is Chance the Rapper with The Big Day. More like The Big Mess, because this is Chance the Rapper's debut album, and before this, the mixtapes he dropped, they're pretty good, pretty okay. There are some pretty good, catchy Chance the Rapper singles, and then we have the debut album, finally, Chance the Rapper. Psych! All we get is 70-something, almost 80 minutes of I love my wife, I love my wife. Chance the Rapper literally sings about being married, not being single, having a wife, and having kids every 50 seconds on this album. And that's not even the main reason why I dislike this album. This album is bloated. It is packed with either absolutely boring, effortless tracks or straight up cringy tracks. Just cringy sounding tracks. And lyrically, all of the songs are bad. All of the songs have terrible lyrics right off the bat. In the first few seconds of the album, Chance the Rapper attempts like 6 very, very bad puns, and it's huge cringe, big cringe. And then the performances, they're kind of obnoxious, actually. We have the track Hot Shower, which is this really dumb, basic song, and it just ends off sounding really irritating and hedonistic. We have this hip house song in the middle of the track list, and it's one of the sloppiest and crappiest hip house songs I've ever heard. And I ain't single no more. I mean, there are loads of other terrible songs here. The skits, they're not funny at all. Actually, they're kind of cheesy and kind of annoying at the same time. And yeah, none of the features here are really all that good. and it's the most disappointing, the most underwhelming, also the worst album of the year, in my opinion. So, what are your least favorite albums of the year? Comments below, let me know. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for best songs of 2019.